We welcome now Caleb Salers and Ben Milam, Multimedia Journalists, SuperTalk Mississippi News.
Yeah, we're getting used to this collaboration thing Ben and I were on with Mandy yesterday morning at the Neshoba County Fair. It's a lot cooler in here in Studio X, where yesterday it was quite warm at Neshoba. Even at 7 o'clock in the morning when we were on with Mandy, we were still already starting to gather up a sweat.
No doubt about that. So, what'd you think about the fair?
Ben?
Well, that was my first time there professionally, and I feel like it was a good one to kind of get your feet wet a little bit in what a lot of people are calling an off year. But there was still plenty to talk about on that first day. You had some candidates and also some people who were already in office. One of those candidates being Ty Pinkins, who was running against Roger Wicker for the Senate seat. And you always kind of wonder. Again, for my first time, but reading about this in the past, you always kind of wonder how a Democrat is going to be received in front of a crowd like that you would presume is the bulk of which are Republican. And I thought he was very impressive. I thought, I don't know how many votes he won. You have no idea about that, but I would imagine he gained some respect, was very direct in his speech, and wrote about it on our website, talked very directly about his military experience, and also challenged Roger Wicker. Didn't use his name, but said my opponent he feels like has neglected, if I can get it out of my mouth, the oath that you take as a military man to defend the United States Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. He feels like there are elected officials in Washington who have neglected that oath. He said my opponent is one of them. I thought that was pretty damning. That's pretty serious accusation. We have not seen Roger Wicker, Senator Wicker, address that. In fact, Ty Pinkins challenged him to a debate. That would 3-4 weeks ago, something like that. Roger Wicker was there the first weekend, but was not able to make it due to the Congress schedule. So that debate did not take place. But I think Ty Pinkins didn't hold back about his Democratic policies. He talked about his stance on abortion. That was actually probably the largest cheer induced out of the crowd, and I thought I thought he was impressive in a lot of different ways because he did not shy away from pressing issues like that.
And I think he read the room well, too. I think Pinkins, when he appealed to appealed to the audience about his military service, his time in combat, how he never abandoned his post, even in tough times in, I believe it was Afghanistan where he was stationed. And he also talked about, serving under both Democratic and Republican presidential not candidates, but seats. And he said that he has experience working across the aisle with both parties. I also thought it was interesting talking about an elected official. We talked about this on the phone, Gerard, about our Central District Public Service Commissioner to keep their stamps, calling on President Joe Biden to step down from office and elevate Kamala Harris, who's the presumptive Democratic nominee, who will more than likely be the party's representative in the presidential election going into November. But he called on the president to step down, saying it would not just be good for the country, but it would be good for Mississippi as well. And I'd love to hear the Central District Commissioner further expound on that. You only get 10 minutes in your stump speech at the show, so it's hard to cover all the topics. And we had some fireworks erupt at Neshoba, day one of the political speaking on Wednesday, with our state auditor, Shad White, and our lieutenant governor, Delbert Hoseman, kind of trading blows. The state auditor talked a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how a lot of state monies, taxpayer dollars, are going to fund these programs, most notably at universities. He talked about, Ole Miss being his alma mater, having X amount of diversity, equity, inclusion officers and programs that are all, again, taxpayer subsidized, and said that this shouldn't be happening in Mississippi. And then he pointed a finger at our lieutenant governor, saying, well, our state legislature has, drafted measures to stop this, but our lieutenant governor, he named him by name, has been a blockade preventing these measures from going through. Now, The lieutenant governor was asked about this after his stump speech. He didn't really mention the state auditor's remarks at all during his speech. All he did was lifted the microphone up and kind of made a joke about Shad White's stature, saying he had to follow the short guy. Well, afterwards, though, at his press conference, he really started digging at the state auditor about his book, about the book that he had written about Brett Favre and the TANF scandal, and said that he hasn't read the book, but he'll get the attorney general to read the book, and he'll go from there on his thoughts on the matter. But basically took a shot saying, yeah, he's always gallivanting his book on book tour, but where is he, when he's supposed to be performing his duties as state auditor? Where is he when he's supposed to be at these speaking events in Mississippi? And the lieutenant governor even said that he was shocked to see Shad White at the Neshoba County Fair this year. So this appears to be kind of an early round of sparring in what might be a contentious gubernatorial or primary race for the next gubernatorial election.
I'm already tired of it.
I think Mississippi might be tired.
Well, then Shad took to Twitter, I think, the day of and today, or the day, I guess, yesterday. Shad White,
auditor,
has taken to calling the lieutenant governor DEI Delbert.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, Gerard. It's probably just the start.
Oh, geez. Okay. Did Senator Wicker speak?
No, Senator Wicker was not there. He had a conflict with his Senate schedule. Being in session. That's what we were told that by his staff.
But his opponent
Ty
in the general election, Ty Pinkins did.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just curious about
yesterday, not a lot of drama yesterday. Ben wrote a very good, comprehensive piece about the Supreme Court race that's open, but mainly
in the Central District.
In the Central District, yes, with Jim Kitchens, the incumbent, and Jennifer Branning, who's a Neshoba native, who got probably the loudest applause.
Big crowd.
Yeah. Big crowd.
That's her hometown, man.
Yes, she's from there. Right. And there were other candidates on the I'll let you expound on that more in just a second. There are more candidates running for that seat, but those two are going to, realistically speaking, those two are going to be the ones on the ballot come general election. And so, I mean, what did you gather from that, Ben?
Well, I think that's a fair assessment. Jennifer Branning has also said in the last couple of months that the fact that there are 5 candidates for this one open seat is proof that there needs to be change, or that people want there to be change. And I think Jennifer Branning is a pretty going to be a tough opponent, especially, we don't want to just zero in on that crowd at Neshoba, because obviously there are a lot more voters to appeal to, but she's going to get a lot of that central Mississippi vote, and it's going to be a challenge, I think, for Jim Kitchens, who is looking for his 3rd term as Supreme Court Justice, which will also play in his favor. But this is going to be one of his biggest challenges. He narrowly won that seat in 2016 for his 2nd term, so that'll be an interesting one to watch for sure.
It was refreshing to hear
8-year terms, by the way.
Yes, 8-year longest term in state, any state elected a position. But it was refreshing to hear those candidates speak, because there, amid all the mudslinging from the state auditor and lieutenant governor, there was none there. I mean, multiple times during his speech, Justice Kitchens spoke on his opponent, saying they're all good people, they're all great people. And Branning did the same thing. Never criticized each other, just said how they would rule fairly, impartially, and just look to the law, not try to rewrite the law, but just interpret it as it's already written.
Well, I interviewed Byron Carter, who's also a candidate, and then also interviewed Jennifer Branning. And I would agree with you. Both of them really focused on their qualifications and their experience and their kind of thoughts about serving in that position.
I felt like that was kind of the best of Mississippi politics on display. You seeing people just touting their own merit, their own record, rather than just mudslinging and talking down. There was no DEI Jim Kitchens or none of that going on.
It is a nonpartisan elected office, so we should keep
that in mind. That's right. But it ain't as much fun though.
There are a few less fireworks, that is to be sure.
And then we capped it off. House Speaker Jason White talked about what he got accomplished, especially with changing the K-12 public education funding formula, and how he plans to keep that momentum going in Mississippi. He talked about how he wants to make cuts to the income tax and the grocery tax, something that we've seen kind of the governor and lieutenant governor butt heads on. And I know you talked to the governor who closed out the speeches yesterday about how he wants to move forward with tax cuts, and he seems to be adamant that he's focused on the income tax. And so we'll see how that further progresses.
The governor, too.
Yes, that was Governor Reeves. Yes, sir.
Great interview with him when he was discussing it. If you guys can hang around, I'm sure we got more to talk about.
Yeah,
sure thing.
Sure.
Love to.
All right, we got the folks from SuperTalk Mississippi News, Ben Milam and Caleb Salers in the Element Well studio. We're stepping aside for a break. Coming right back. Stay with us. We're talking to Caleb Salers and Ben Milam. They are multimedia journalists with SuperTalk Mississippi News. They spent the last couple of days over at Mississippi's giant house party,
That's right.
the Neshoba County Fair. Anytime folks ask me where we set up the SuperTalk Mississippi set, because it always hasn't been where we set it up now. It's a few paces away from the pavilion in
right
Founders
there,
Square. There,
right there.
Can't miss it. And we saw a lot of good friends that love the show, love the network, love our site, our news department. Always good to catch up with people in person that tell you, yeah, we listen every day and really enjoy, and we consume the news and so forth. You guys do a great job. But, man, we had a full slate between the Gallo Show. Mandy Gunasekara hosted that yesterday at the fair, and then our show. I think we talked to everybody just about, right, at the high level of government. And it's interesting. It's not, you're not getting the campaign speeches like you normally do if it were a statewide election year. But they're certainly starting to dip their toes a little bit.
Some jockeying.
Yeah, into that. So maybe they're setting us up for what we could expect in the future. Anything that Secretary of State Michael Watson said that caught your attention?
I mean, just a lot of the status quo, talking about how he's working to secure Mississippi's elections, making sure that illegal immigrants don't vote in Mississippi's elections. Now, we have asked in the past if he could provide examples of undocumented illegal immigrants voting in Mississippi elections. Haven't gotten any further information, any specific details there, but that was one of his things that he harped on. And then he talked about cutting the red tape, deregulating businesses, making Mississippi a more business-friendly environment without all these excess government regulations. And, just a lot of the status quo. Again, like you just mentioned, Gerard, it's not an election year, but you had something, Ben?
No.
You were looking at me like you had something.
I was just listening
Caleb,
actively.
You also treasure David McRae spoke, and you wrote a piece about some of the accomplishments that he touted.
So this one really caught my attention. He talked about how in the past 5 years, he was elected treasurer in 2019, reelected last year, how he has recovered. He's been big on this, giving unclaimed money back to Mississippians. He will hold these summits, different parts of the state. I know recently he had one in Brandon where people can go, and there's going to be employees with the state treasurer's office helping you reclaim unclaimed money or recoup unclaimed money. And in the past 5 years, $100 million have been given back to the state of Mississippi. And one thing he said that caught my attention was that, this is not the government's money. This is your money, and we want to make sure that you get this. So, please call us, go to our website. We will do everything in our power to give you this money. He also talked about how in fiscal year 2024, the state's investments took a really good turn, $375 million collected in interest, which, Gerard, the bulk of that's going to go into the general fund. So that kind of alleviates any potential tax burdens that would be levied on citizens, levied on us, residents. And then finally, he talked about how they're pretty much nearly fully funded at the Impact, the college savings plan that locks in tuition rates now so that you're not having to worry about them fluctuating, going up, and helping college be more affordable for Mississippi families. So, what he's trying to do there is cultivate an environment in Mississippi that allows families to, raise their children in an economically feasible place and, have college as a reality, not just something like, well, we just hope these scholarships come about. No, you can actually send your kids to college and it be affordable rather than you worrying about going into crippling debt or your children going into crippling debt down the road.
Ben, you wrote a piece recently about airports across the state of Mississippi receiving some additional funding for upgrades and some renovation and so forth. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. 2 different rounds. Caleb actually wrote the first one. That was on Monday, I believe. About $7 million going to 18 different Mississippi airports. A lot of just infrastructure stuff, stuff on the perimeter of the facilities, runways, things like that, that just make these airports run more efficiently and safety parameters, things like that. So that was about $8 million, and today about 5.3, a little over $5.3 million. So total of almost $15.5 million going towards 18 total different Mississippi airports. That was Senator Roger Wicker, who was one of the points on that, and talked about the fact that he has made a real push towards getting more federal grant money into infrastructure in Mississippi, and I think that is one area in terms of infrastructure in Mississippi that's maybe been lacking a little bit, and there's a new emphasis on that to make that experience and how those airports run more efficiently and just better in general to increase the quality of Mississippi airports. And that's a big step forward. $15 million, with all the big number figures we throw around, covering this kind of stuff may seem like a drop in the bucket, but that's a big step forward, especially I think kind of setting the precedent for investing in facilities like that in Mississippi.
Well, that's a good point. I think most people, of course, experience the commercial airports where the commercial airliners, aviation is conducted, but aren't quite as aware of the general aviation airports.
Sure.
But they're pretty critical and important to economic activity and commerce in the state.
Well, and especially you talked about, and we've talked about this, we've especially over these last couple of months talked about the economic opportunities coming to Mississippi. And you would imagine, these big, these leaders of these national and international corporations coming in to look at Mississippi, to scout these sites to see what would be beneficial for their business, and they come in and see an airport in disrepair or that doesn't run efficiently. That's an indictment on the infrastructure of the state, and so investing in that is going to help in more ways than one.
Well, I can tell you just from business experience, first exposure you have. If you've never, I've had lots of folks that come here that had never been to Mississippi, so they're going to fly into the airport, and first thing they see in Mississippi is that airport.
That's right.
And it can kind of make a positive impression or a negative impression. I personally think the Jackson Airport is in need of some improvement and renovation.
And the Senate, right now, the U.S. Senate there was one committee that approved a lump sum of money of over $5 million that would go to the Jackson airport, but it's part of the appropriations package, and we know that that's probably not going to go through right now. They'll pass some temporary measure keeping the existing funding levels intact until we see what happens in November with the general election. One thing I want to note, too, on this deal with all these dollars going into the airports across Mississippi is this comes from the infrastructure plan that was passed by
American Rescue Plan.
The bipartisan infrastructure.
The bipartisan infrastructure bill. Right.
And, our senators voted opposite sides of each other on this one.
Yep.
Roger Wicker was in favor of it. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith was against it. She voted against it. And so Senator Wicker has been touting this bill a lot and the monies that have come from it, and you're kind of seeing some of the rewards it's yielding in Mississippi. I mean, you see our airports statewide getting a facelift, much necessary facelift.
Yeah, got it. All right, so what about the big Hall of Fame induction that's coming up? What about that, Ben?
Sure. Well, eight new inductees in the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame are going to be inducted Saturday, correct?
Yes.
Caleb? Saturday, and they'll have a big banquet and reception on Friday. It's a full weekend that will be celebrating these inductees. I'll tell you who they are. Of note, Eli Manning is kind of, probably one of the biggest
He played quarterback or something, right?
He is the biggest. Yeah, I think he had a pretty good career. The biggest name in that group, Eli Manning, then Richard DeWeese, who was my high school basketball coach, one of the all-time winningest coaches, period, in Mississippi high school in American high school basketball history. And then you've got Red Barber, one of the all-time greats in the broadcasting world, play-by-play broadcaster for the Yankees and the Reds. Paul Elias, Jimmy Smith Jr., Savante Stringfellow, Becky Vest, and Jimmy Webb are the rest of those inductees. That's a pretty strong class, and there's going to be a lot of celebration, and rightfully so.
Man.
Be a big weekend.
And then nationally, too, Patrick Willis, standout linebacker from Ole Miss and San Francisco 49ers linebacker. He is being inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame on Saturday. They announced him last night in Canton, Ohio, among the other members of the class as they did the Pro Football Hall of Fame game. And so it was really neat to see. You know, Patrick Willis was on some really, really bad Ole Miss football teams, but he was a shining light on that defense.
One-man defensive wrecking crew. Had to be because he was the only one that could get to the ball carrier.
Well, and a man that they put a club on his arm, and he played better.
Exactly right.
Played better, but had a storied career in the NFL. I mean, he was Rookie of the Year and or Defensive Player of the Year his rookie season, and just a lot of accolades, one of the tackling leaders during his time in the NFL, and just was a known presence on the field.
From Tennessee.
Yep.
But was not recruited by the University of Tennessee.
He went and
like
played
a
for
3-star or something coming out. Now he's going into the Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame.
Unbelievable. Great story there. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Gerard.
We're stepping aside for a break. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.